with Max Planck or maybe with the universities, and what industry really needs. So we are only funded to 1/3 by government, and 2/3 of our budget, which will be this year around 2 billion euros with more than 20,000 people, and 2/3 of that budget is earned in direct contract research, which we have mainly with industry. So as far as that picture is makes quite sense. And the people at Max Planck are not competitors to us. We are good friends and have a lot of joint projects. But we have two other organizations in Germany that should be mentioned. There is a very big Helmholtz organization. They are responsible for all the big hospitals, for the big investments which we have in physics research and in nuclear power research and those areas where government also wants to have a hand on it, so to speak. And then there is a fourth organization, also very important but not so easy to describe. It is a Leibniz organization because they have very different tasks inside that. So this is the overall picture. I could say we started in Germany already what we called an innovation offensive back 3 legislative periods, at that time still with Chancellor Schröder with his agenda 2020. But then after the change of the government, the new government under leadership from Ms. Merkel went on in that way. Just to give an example, in this legislative period, the Ministry for Education and Research was the only ministry who increased its budget. The increase was around 12 billion euros, and by the way, in the last period, it was already an increase of 8 billion euros. So I think we can say that the government has not only made announcement, they really took money and invested that in the innovation system. Now, how far goes the influence from government? The influence is normally over-evaluated if somebody looks on Germany from outside. If you take the whole budget that is invested in innovation and research in Germany, then only 1/3 comes from government. 2/3 comes from industry. And that 1/3 from the government includes, of course, the money for the university, and they have teaching tasks, which are very important, but do not directly make a contribution to the innovative investments. So if somebody wants to have a look on Germany to evaluate the innovation system, you cannot do that without not considering what happens really in research and in innovation procedures in the companies. As far as the government is concerned, we decided now 8 years ago in Germany that we should have something like a high-tech strategy. So that 1/3 is still a big amount of money, and it's taxpayers' money, and in which areas should it be spent and for what purpose should that money be used? It's a difficult question. Can that be decided by the politicians alone? Can that be decided by people from industry alone? And of course it can also not be decided by people from the research area alone. So we set up a group, the name is Research Union, and said we will build a high-tech strategy, not only for the Ministry of Research and Education, for the whole government. So all ministries are included. By the way, it's the first time we tried to do that. We are still not at the end of cooperation between different ministries, but we are on a good way. That is what I want to say. And these are nearly 24 people, to give you an idea, and 1/3 of the people in that research union where we set up the high-tech strategy comes from industry, also from medium-sized industry. 1/3 are the politicians, and 1/3 come from the research community. If you are a member of that group, I didn't run fast enough away when they set up the group, so together with Mr. Oetker, I am head of that research union, but each member in that group gets a task. So if you would be, for example, I saw next door, Siemens has a conference about energy aspects. If you would be responsible in that research union for renewable energy, then it is your task as a member to organize the best experts throughout the country to define what has to be done. And then you come back with that report in the research union. So not all detailed work is done in that group, because the qualification would not be broad enough and also not deep enough to do something like that. So there are sitting the moderators, so to speak, and they set them up the high-tech strategy. And that made us, for our minister, Ms. Chavan, I suppose, much easier to defend their budget. Because when she came in the cabinet, you could say, you see, this is a joint decision of all the ministries, not only of my ministry. And the industry is standing behind that, and the stupid scientists also. So it was something like to try to find a consensus where set 1/3 of the budget should go. We defined 6 areas. I think it will now go too much into detail. By the way, you can also see that on the website of our Ministry of Science and Education. But I think looking on the innovation system, it was really very important that we saw that we can defend the market position in Germany only to become much better as we are already. You see, we lost a lot of workplaces because we have so high labor costs, not only to Asia, also to Eastern Europe, which is what is sometimes underevaluated around in the region here. The wages are not much higher in Eastern Europe than they are here in Asia. And if we think about what should be done in the future, there are not many alternatives. There may be a possibility we lower our position, which we have already, or we invest in innovation. And more people are aware of that it does not make sense if we produce the same as it is produced already in Eastern Europe or around in Asia, much cheaper. We have to find new ways where we got on the world market the prices which we need to defend that position. So we still, of course, have a lot of things that have to be solved. So one of the things where we have to become much better is, now we have brought industry, now we have brought the politicians and the scientists in a mechanism which works quite well together to define a high-tech strategy, but now we have to bring the population, the citizens, into the boat. Just to give an example, we have, for example, decided a bit abruptly for me as a scientist to go out the electricity production via nuclear power plants. So it means that we have now to invest heavily in renewable energy. That means we build windmills. Not so nice if you suddenly have a windmill in your garden where you before have had a meadow or a forest. And we have to invest in lines which we have as new grids inside the cities and from the coast to the south of Germany. So the ways how we get a better participation with the population, that we get a higher acceptance, that what is already clear between the specialists, so to speak, is on a broader basis in the population. That is something where we at the moment try to work on also in that research union, which I mentioned before. And third aspect should be mentioned. Our industry is very much globalized. As you see, if you drive around here in Delhi or where I came just from in Bangalore, there are thousands of workplaces from German companies already in that area. So for industry, it is quite obvious that they do a global business. In research, it is quite obvious since decades that we read the publications from our colleagues around the world, we attend the conferences, but that we do jointly projects under market conditions, under international market conditions, is not so obvious. And I think that will be a next step for our universities and for research organizations also. This is, by the way, the reason why I am here in India and in other countries, that we have to stand that test, that we can work successful together with our research colleagues, and in our specific case by Fraunhofer, as we are so near to industry, also then with companies and with industry people in those countries. So the internationalization in that sense of the science community and the innovative processes is also one of the next steps, which is absolutely necessary. Overall, now I make a very emotional remark from the scientific community side, we are not unsatisfied as far as the results seen in economy are concerned. I mentioned it with my initial statement. I think there is also been proven that innovation is, for the situation in which we are in Germany and in Europe overall, absolutely a must. Thank you.
Thank you. We are running about 10 minutes late, but before we close for tea or coffee, I want to introduce three of my colleagues at the National Innovation Council: Dr. Ramesh Maselkar, Kiran Karnik, Saurabh Srivastava, and Arun Maira was here, but he went out and I'm sure he'll come and join. One last item. I'd like my young team to stand up. Can you all stand up, please? Just stand up. I know, you know. Where are the others? This group of people got this conference organized, especially Sukhman. Sukhman took the lead, got everything organized. My input is get the conference done on 1st and 2nd, and that's it. They got the whole thing done. Thanks a lot. Let's go have coffee and then come back. Thank you. We have about 10-12 minutes. Tea or coffee on the table here. Don't worry about it. Can we get going, please? We are running late. Quick. Can we get Suhan? Bring everybody from there here inside.
Or we close the door.
Yeah. Okay, Dr. Garola, it's all yours.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon and welcome to the second session. This session basically is around the crowdsourcing and innovation. I have a team of speakers, eminent speakers. First of all, my name is Garola. It's mentioned here that I am Director General, National Informatics Center. As of yesterday, I have switched over to a new assignment and I am Mission Director, E-Governance, Government of India. To my right is Samir Mitra, who is the Senior Advisor to the National Innovation Council. That's a group that Sam heads. Then we have Muhi Majob, Vice President, Open Text Data. Then we have Drew Van Gulam, Development Marketplace Initiative World Bank. Peter Small, Senior Program Officer, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Then we have Lalitesh, Head Engineer, Emerging Market Products, Google, whom you heard just now. And then we have Zaki Thomas, who is the Project Director of Open Source. Friends, this session is basically on crowdsourcing innovation. Crowdsourcing is essentially a means of using the group which is not an organized group, a group which is in the crowd, so to say. This has been used in the past quite a bit, and I remember good old days when we have vehicles in India which are not very reliable. If you happen to visit a village and your vehicle has an accident or something, you go around, search the crowd, put them together, and try to extricate your system. With the advent of internet, what we found is that the size of the crowd which you can make use of grew large. I remember about 10 years back when the crowdsourcing was not that prevalent, that one of the professionals said, is it possible for me to use somebody whom I don't know for development of a piece of software? So what he did was he wrote a small requirement, pushed it out to the university, and said anybody who will perform and write the code for this, he will pay $100. One young fellow walked in, wrote the code, he tested it, and finally he gave him the $100. So the crowdsourcing that we see today has become much more elaborate and widespread simply because we have a very large mass of people connected into cyberspace. When we talk about crowdsourcing in India, we had been using for many areas, for example, for social audit, accountability, getting the feedback from the people across the country, we are still using it. But the question is, can we use crowdsourcing for innovation? As Sam said, interest is to get innovation for the bottom of the pyramid. As he said that most of the people who do innovation don't work for the bottom of the pyramid. But I know there are enough number of people in India at least who are ready to do innovation for the bottom of the pyramid so long as there's a means and mechanism to perform that task. So I think the topic today that we are going to discuss is basically to see how we can create a mechanism by which those who create innovation, those who are involved in innovation, can pick problems which are, let's say, for the bottom of the pyramid and are able to provide solutions for them. This not only will provide us the opportunity to build a solution for a problem, but also will give us a mechanism to teach the people at the bottom of the pyramid how innovation is done. And I think it's extremely important that at the end of the day, it's important that they start innovating themselves. So this will become an induction effect through which they will be in a position to work out on how to innovate for themselves for the problems that they have. I would like to start the presentation with Samir, who will be speaking about the data.gov or open data policy that we have had in India. Thank you, Samir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garola. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Samir Mitra. I'm part of the group at the National Innovation Council, and it's not that loud? Okay. Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay. I'm going to talk to you about the open government platform that Sam this morning alluded to. We've started this project jointly with the U.S. government and the Indian government. We had a set of a joint software team that we, with Dr. Garola's help and also the U.S. government from Anish Chopra's team in the U.S., developed essentially a open government platform that is really a mechanism to provide transparency and information and data and documents open to the public. Oh, should I just use this? Okay. Which is ultimately going to be open to the public, and the whole intent is to essentially crowdsource developing of new applications using government data for really citizen participation and benefit. So I'll show you a few slides of what open government platform is and actually some of the results that we expect. Next slide. So the Open Government Initiative was started, as Sam mentioned, together with the US government and the Indian government, really to promote accountability and transparency and fundamentally enable citizen participation in the whole governance process. Our intent was to really enable citizens to participate, understand, and actually create independent applications to use data to drive their everyday decisions and impact their lives. But the whole aspect of the Open Government Initiative was essentially to create new innovative applications that the government, or in some cases, even the citizens themselves could never even think of. So in that sense, we are trying to create a platform for crowdsourcing of innovation, primarily to drive new applications for citizens. Next slide. So the Open Government Platform consists really of two parts. There is a government side of this software platform, which essentially is trying to extract and get formats of different data sets from different agencies and different ministries, whether it be health data, census data, agriculture information, tons and tons of different data that the government actually has in the background, and really bring and develop a workflow so that this data can be sanitized, and then a workflow system so that it can ultimately be approved so that sensitive data or incorrect information is not actually sent out to the public. So there's a whole workflow system just inside the government among different agencies, and everything is web-oriented, a very simple and easy way to be able to allow the government itself to bring about data that they want to expose. And we started initially with data sets, but now we're going to enable documents, different tools, and so it's not anything that relates to information will really become available as part of this platform. The second part of the platform is the citizens part. And this is where we've produced a data portal, which is really a single point of access for citizens to get access to the different data sets and documents that the government has, and to be able to allow citizen engagement and ranking and rating of these data sets, being able to ask for new information and have a collaborative conversation with the government. And for that, we've created what, as you see on the bottom of this diagram, is a set of communities. These are communities of interest. There's citizens who are interested in agriculture. There's citizens interested in water, in health, in multiple types of communities. So they can have a conversation and dialogue with the government around the data and documents that are being produced. So there's really two parts of this open government platform. We started this project about 11 months ago. We finished it in about 8 months' time. Both software teams in the US and India never met face-to-face. All we worked on was Skype and GitHub. And we actually produced a very solid piece of software. And so I think it's a very great example of a bilateral collaboration, but can really be expanded to a multilateral collaboration as well. Next slide. So this platform has been open sourced. It's available on GitHub. GitHub is basically the place where almost all open source platforms are now being set and available. You can go to GitHub, any government, state, city, or any organization, if they want a platform to be able to allow access of their documents and data sets, can basically freely use this. There's no requirements to follow any kind of specific needs. Basically use it and hopefully benefit your citizens. We've launched 2 data sites. One is the India site, which is data.gov.in, and also the US site also has data.gov, and you can go onto the internet and look at these platforms. Next slide. So this is just an initial sort of front page. You can configure this in many different ways. So if you want to kind of configure things in different manners, so apps, communities, data sets, these are all configurable type of pages. We have automatic feeds into Facebook, Twitter, different social media type of outlets, so that the information, if there's a brand new data set that comes up, it can immediately be and shown to a Facebook community. So that all that kind of automation already exists from a social media perspective. Next slide. Here's an example of one of the page of how data sets actually look. So there's some data set over here relating to residential energy, and you can see citizens are having seen it, they're ranking and rating it, so that there's also feedback for the government and whoever are the persons involved in that particular department to see if the citizens are even interested in those data sets. Next slide. One of the things that we did to spark new applications based on this data is to create challenges. So we went out, and India has just started on that, but US has a lot more experience, to create these challenges around government data, to create new types of applications. So we would get out onto the platform and say, we need a new type of health application using this health data sets combined with GIS data of some form. So we've had applications that can now come up, mobile applications that can come up and sort of say, if you're an asthma patient, it will tell you in real time that if you're going to a specific location by plane, that particular area has a high pollen count, and therefore you should take your asthma medicine. So that is taking government data combined with geographical data and applying it as a mobile application. That really could never happen before. It's now because we're making the data available. Next slide.
So apps and data really drive decisions. So we've had a lot of interest, both in US, I think is farther ahead. India is just starting to get new types of applications. So there's mobile applications, web applications, there's new tablet applications. So this just opens up a whole new sort of value creation by just doing very little amount of work on our side from the government. Next slide. We've had now communities getting started in various areas relating to health, law, education. These are some of the examples on the US side. They have about 13 very, very healthy and vigorous communities trying to be engaged in a two-way dialogue with the government. And next slide, I'll just give you an example of usdata.gov. Next slide. So you can see in just matter of 3 years, this is US data, and we feel that in India we're going to have similar kinds of numbers. Almost 1,200 new applications have been created. This we could never plan sitting in the four walls within a government office. We could never create so many different types of applications. And that, I think, is the power of this kind of platform and how we can really crowdsource creating new types of applications using government data. And the last slide I would just sort of end is we really think open government will be the new government. And I think we should embrace the fact that the internet has web has changed everything for us. And I think the youth in our countries are going to demand this. So we might as well get ahead of the curve rather than being left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samir. I just wanted to add what Samir said, is that as far as Government of India is concerned, we now have what's called a data sharing policy. Now, this is the only thing that works.
Yeah,
so we have to share it now. So we have a data sharing policy which mandates that every department shall make a negative list, and the positive list must come into the portal. Within 6 months, 4 data sets or 5 data sets have to be defined and pushed into these systems. So at the moment, Government of India at the highest level is pushing all departments. So we hope that over a period of 3 to 5 months, you will have at least 600 to 700 data sets which will be available. Thank you very much. Now may I request Muhi Muzabun to speak it out, sir.
Thank you, Dr.
You may use either the presentation or as you wish.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here with you, representing OpenText and Canada. What I am hoping to bring to you today is a perspective on crowdsourcing of what innovation and technology has done to crowdsourcing in the past 50, 60 years. I will start by sharing with you an example of how crowdsourcing was done in the middle of the 20th century. If you think it couldn't cross countries and boundaries, it couldn't cross cultures. One example that comes to mind, when the Oxford English Dictionary decided to index all the English words, they put out a call for the public to help them, which was an example of crowdsourcing. It took them 70 years to get 6 million submissions to help. That's how hard it was in the mid-20th century. Today, you could put a call out on social networks, on the internet, and you could get 6 million hits in 1 day, or 1 hour, or 1 week. The internet did change everything, and the innovation that technology have brought to crowdsourcing is amazing. If you think of the open source communities today around the world, and being in the software industry for the past 30 years, open source has been critical to big companies like Google and Oracle and many others, including OpenText. And open source can solicit the feedback and the help of millions of engineers in multiple countries, in multiple cultures, speaking multiple languages, who can contribute to that code in ways much faster than we have done in the past. There are 3 reasons, or 2 reasons, that I think innovation has been critical to crowdsourcing. The first one is the internet and the social communities, which made it very easy for innovators to put a call out to the public and very quickly be able to send the message across the wire and get the feedback and get the submissions and the acknowledgement from the public. Whether you're in the public sector, in governments, and we see it in every country in Europe, North America, in India, and Asia Pacific, Africa, they're all using some sort of portals or data communication to their citizens today to provide them services, but also to solicit their feedback. The second area is the analysis that you could do on the submissions that you receive, which today are can be done much quicker, much more automated than we could have done in the mid-20th century. The submissions that the Oxford Dictionary was receiving was all hard papers. And in those days, they couldn't be OCR'd, they couldn't be automatically read. They had to be manually entered and recognized by humans. Today, you could put an application that solicits feedback from the citizens or from the community, and through big data, you can analyze it, you can make decisions based on facts. I can only dream of what crowdsourcing would be in 10, 15 years, but I think it's going to be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Can I now request Mr. Drew Van Graham? Yourself.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'm here from the World Bank's Development Marketplace. The Development Marketplace is a platform under the World Bank's Institute's Innovation Labs, in which we have basically taken the approach that social enterprises are a key component to addressing the challenges of the global poor. And so what the DM is a grant-making organization, or part of the World Bank, in which we look to surface, incubate, and then help grow social enterprises. So over the past decade, we've been working with different social enterprises. So let me talk a little bit about from a kind of how we get about this and why it ties into the open sourcing, crowdsourcing approach. Let me just do by a raise of hands here, people that might know of a social enterprise that they view has done transformative things in their communities, just by a show of hands. Does anybody know of any that have? A couple here? More than a couple? All right, how many of these would you want to see them grow and scale? Okay, I think for everyone that you know that you think is successful, you want to grow and scale, and that's really what is a small example of what the whole DM is about in terms of trying to access population input in terms of what is out there and what do we need to grow and scale. So what have we done? Over the last decade or so, we've been working around the globe with different communities to look for, shall I play to that one? I've got two here now. Okay, we're going to ignore that one. Okay, we'll stick with this. It's working fine anyway. So what we do is we use competitions to find from communities organizations that work with the poor, and they can range from education programs, healthcare, sanitation, economic opportunity, or women empowerment, any type of along these lines. Over the past year here in India, as an example, using one of these approaches of our development marketplace, we sourced about 200 organizations in the lagging states of India, of Orissa, Rajasthan, and Bihar. We were ultimately able to select through that about 15 very impressive organizations that have either technologies, business models, or processes that are able to really transform the way services are given to the poor. The goal with this ultimately is to help grow and scale these, as I mentioned. I'll come back to that in a second about how crowdsourcing plays into that. But a very important part is then to tie and link these to the government initiatives that are paralleling these processes. So where do we go beyond just using crowdsourcing and open sourcing from a competition and sourcing of these ideas is in the other challenges that are in front of these social enterprises. One of the key problems they all have is raising capital. And meanwhile, we've seen in the crowdsourcing area things like Kiva, Global Giving, et cetera, that are doing some impressive things. Today, Kiva, as an example, is doing about $7 million a month in lending to small organizations and individuals that are assisting with poverty situations. The question we have from the World Bank Institute is there a way to try to scale that type of thing for social enterprises? Kiva itself thinks that they are right now around 850,000 lenders, as they call them, doing these, if you're familiar with their business model, about $25 to $50 loans. They think they can take that to 20 million individual lenders. So if you take that math, you can start getting close to $2 billion worth of annual support to social enterprises. There are challenges in implementing it, but that's the kinds of things we at the lab, Innovation Lab at the World Bank, are looking at, helping organizations like, that try to use such technologies of open source or crowdsourcing to try to get capital to these organizations so they can grow and scale. Another challenge that we confront when helping social enterprises is the potential for the for-profit ones that have shown that they can do for-profit models to service the poor. Again, healthcare, sanitation, solar power, other programs like that have shown great efficacy. But again, they too face the problem of scaling or accessing capital. And one of the problems for them is that the impact investing community, there is now reported there will be billions of dollars waiting to invest in these types of organizations. There's just a real challenge for them to do the due diligence of these small and emerging organizations. The cost of the due diligence alone can undermine their capacity to provide the financing. So again, we're now looking at is, can crowdsourcing be used for due diligence and bring those costs down? Because right now the cost of due diligence is just completely misaligned with the size of the investments that would be needed to spur these organizations. So these are three different examples, from sourcing, financially supporting, or bringing in new players to assist in the analysis of the potential social enterprises as ways we see crowdsourcing and open source access to drive changes from private and civil society organizations. So that's it from this side.
Thank you very much. Can I now request Dr. Peter to give his thoughts, please?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I have the privilege to work for a couple, Bill and Melinda Gates, who have devoted virtually their entire wealth to a simple principle, and that is that everyone deserves the opportunity to live a healthy and productive life. And they understand that innovation is central to that goal. I also have the privilege to live and work here in India. It's a country that has a culture of innovation that's led to solutions that have transformed health, both domestically and internationally. And it's one of the world's largest talent pools in terms of scientists, researchers, and entrepreneurs who could become engaged in the issues of the poor. However, getting those people to focus on the problems of the poor is a huge challenge. And recognizing this challenge, 9 years ago, the Gates Foundation initiated what we called the Grand Challenges of Global Health. It was a roughly $450 million effort to identify about a dozen key gaps, which if they were filled, knowledge gaps, which if they were filled would unleash health and prosperity. I have to say that program was extremely effective from our perspective. When we look back at it, we feel like about a third of them were good investments. And yet, it failed to really get out into the crowd. You know, when you're making $20 million investments, you tend to end up with the usual suspects, and review tends to kill innovation. So we've now switched to a smaller mechanism, so-called Grand Challenge Explorations. It's 2 pages, $100,000. And I want to talk about 4 critical steps in the process. The first step is putting out public calls, and that really capture the imagination and attract the world's best researchers, and focuses the efforts on these gaps. The key challenge here is really to articulate those challenges well, and to make sure that the word gets out to the entire crowd. Because while there are many people who are on the internet, there are many more people who can contribute to solutions, and reaching those groups is complicated. Second point is that the grants are selected not just for their scientific merit, but largely based on their likelihood of impacting health. And that raises a second challenge, which, as I said, the more review you have, the less likely you are to fund innovation. However, if you have no review, you are certain to fund garbage. And so somewhere in between is the right touch, and we struggle with that. The third thing is that funders, investigators need to actively collaborate together. And so it's not a question of writing a grant check and coming back at the end of 5 years. It's how do you really engage with these people? And this is a challenge familiar to anyone who's tried to run coalitions and partnerships. And then finally, the investigators need to make global access commitments. In other words, before they get any money from the Gates Foundation, they have to explain to us how it is that the insights and the fruits of their research are available to those who are most in need. And this is a complicated and has become actually a very technical field of how do you structure contracts so that you retain the profit upside and yet ensure global access to those who really need it. So we've got a number of these grants that are sort of out and about right now. There's one here in India that I'm quite excited about, which is with Veer Chauhan's group at ICGEB, which is looking at electronic noses as a way of diagnosing tuberculosis. It's very exciting work. Yes, Ranjan. Yeah, and well, so the idea is that in the old days, doctors used to diagnose disease by smelling the patient. And in fact, in Tanzania, they have rats that can smell TB. So there's some signal there, but it's amongst an ocean of noise. And so what ICGEB is doing is they're using state-of-the-art gas chromatography to identify the unique molecules that are in the urine and the breath of TB patients. And the vision is that you would have the ability to have someone breathe into a machine and diagnose TB. It's still a long ways off, but it's very exciting. I think one of the exciting things for EBT to partner on the Grand Challenges initiatives about accelerating mutual priorities in infectious diseases, family health, and agriculture. Rajban was instrumental, as he always is in these things, and has selected BRAC as the Indian management organization who will be overseeing that. And I guess just to end by saying that given India's culture of innovation, we're really excited to see what the outcome of this partnership with DBT and the foundation is. And I'm also really excited to hear about your own efforts, the National Innovation Council's work on crowdsourcing platforms, and I really embrace the opportunity to learn from the good work that you'll be doing in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have Lalitesh, who has already spoken a little bit about his project a little earlier, but we will now have a little more detail from him. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thanks. So one of the things that I was asked to do when we moved to India to create Google India, I used to work in Mountain View before, was to think of problems and solve them, which had an impact on India and regions like this. And the output of that was a crowdsourcing platform, which really began as an idea in 2004, but took off around 2008, called MapMaker. And the idea behind that was that the world is not mapped. 5 billion people did not have maps, and maps are central to development and information systems. And 2008 was when we launched it for India and Vietnam, Pakistan, and so on. And then slowly it spread around the world. It's one of those innovations which started in the East and spread to the West. And in 2011, we launched it in the US, and then the circle was complete. And as a result of that, 180 countries now have maps that did not have maps before in pretty good detail. And 1.5 billion people more have maps who did not have maps before. And it was, some of the learnings we got there are learnings we are now trying to use to figure out how we address this problem called dark knowledge. And I had the privilege to attend the Bloom Roundtable for Poverty in Colorado in the summer. And one of the economists there, essentially, if you listen to them very closely, boiled it down to two problems that the developing world has. And the two problems were we need a friction-free way for people to pay each other, and information is at the heart of poverty. And the way I like to think about it is there is this cloud of dark knowledge that surrounds us. And most of the people in this room are living in a society where we have bridged the gaps in the dark knowledge using systems and processes which are expensive but have made it easy for us. For example, how do you follow the law? How do you make the law work for you? How do you make contracts work for you? And how do you find a job? And so on and so forth. And if you look at each of these things, we have systems to help us smooth the way. Some of them we pay for, some of them we don't pay for, and so on and so forth. Now, these problems are at the heart of what creates and sustains poverty. And let me give you a couple of examples. So when I talk to the slum behind the housing neighborhood I live in, Bangalore, it's a construction slum. And most places in India have construction zones right now. And when I go to the workers there, they are all from Bihar, which is the state which has been impoverished until recently. It's starting to develop better, I guess. And when you talk to them and you ask them about how much they make and how they got this job and how they got here, something very interesting emerges, that 30% of the income that they get, they give to the middle person who actually got them the job. Now you ask them a very interesting question, which is, why is it that you continue paying this 30% given that you can go to any construction zone in Bangalore and get a job because there is a massive shortage of labor. And if you live in an Indian city, you know there is a massive shortage of labor, at least in urban India. And the answer that comes back is they have no trust, no belief that they will have this job without the person who they have come to depend on. And this is an information problem, right? And another example is, and there's a lot of people who ask this question in frustration after living in India for a while, which is, why is it that the level of skill of labor is so bad? And the answer again is, comes down to dark knowledge, which is, and let me again give you an example in my own life, and this is true for pretty much everybody. The community we live in, most of the people, about 80%, have cars and have drivers who drive them around. And there is a very interesting phenomenon. The income of each of those drivers, and I did go to the 150 houses in my community and ask most of them, the income of each of these drivers is about the same. It's somewhere between 10 to 12,000 rupees per month. And it used to be somewhere between 8 to 9,000 rupees per month 4 years ago, and so on. And the reason it is about the same is nobody really knows who the really good drivers are, and nobody really knows who the really bad drivers are. So whoever shows up at your doorstep, you kind of know he's worked somewhere in the neighborhood, so you have some trust in them, and you say, okay, this guy has driven for 3 or 4 years, I'll pay him 12. Otherwise, you start with 10, and there's no differentiation. And it's not a surprise that there is no differentiation. Anybody who's worked in HR knows if you don't have compensation systems, there is no reason for them to become better. So these guys who are extremely entrepreneurial, very motivated, very driven, and most of these drivers are sending their kids to private schools. They're trying to actually move up the aspirational ladder. They're trying to do everything that many of the parents of the Indians in this room did. And at the same time, they have no way to make their own life better using an arbitrage system which is broken, and this information arbitrage system. And if you talk to Nandan and Sam, we had a very interesting conversation yesterday. Some of the problems they're trying to solve are exactly these problems, right? How do you build a skill profile? How do you build a system where the crowd can contribute to both creating the profile? I would be very happy if such a system existed, for example, to create a profile for my driver, even if he's not able to. right? And and some of this can be addressed via policy, where you can say, hey, every construction worker working in your construction zone needs a profile, right? These are policy things that can be addressed. And over time, what happens is, if these systems exist, via the crowd helping each other for personal reason or for business reasons, you would have systems which would come in place, which would be 100 to 1,000 times more expensive if built any other way, where not only would you have trust and skill level awareness of the people who are working, you would also have the reverse, which is trust and awareness of the employer as well, which is also missing. I mean, today you don't know which employers are actually treating their employees well and which employers are not. And in a developing economy like India, the law and order is enforced to a certain extent because it costs a lot to enforce the law and order to a large extent. So let me take you back to MapMaker to give you a sense of what is possible. One of the things that we did, we discovered very early on, is that when people map, right, they map for a reason that they get instant gratification. If they don't immediately see what they are changing reflected in the world, people don't crowdsource. And Wikipedia learned it, we learned it, and so on. And the other thing that we learned is that if you want every edit that a user does on the map to go live instantly on Google Maps, you would break the maps, right? When we launched MapMaker India, one of the first edits was somebody changed the name of Chennai to a name I will not speak in this room. And our trust system denied it, and the heart of it is a trust system that needs to be built and curated. And the key to having a trust system is not only do you need people and experts to monitor these things, we learned that we have to, for the sake of making this fast, which is again the diligence problem that you mentioned, which comes up in innovation. For sake of making it fast, you need the ability for the machine to figure out who to trust over time at scale. And that reduces the cost of getting innovation or knowledge or anything that we want online from dollars to pennies. So when we started, the cost of mapping a kilometer of road using traditional mapping technology was about $15 to $20 per kilometer using GPS trucks. Today, the global cost, the total cost of mapping a kilometer of road is about 5 to 10 cents, and it's dropping. What we are doing in Google, having learned all this, is we are working in this area called emerging markets, where everything looks like a crowdsourcing problem. And the problems that we are trying to solve is how do you actually build education and skill level and knowledge onlining systems where there is motivations, commercial motivation for people to do that at scale. Because the commercial motivations that made the internet for the first 1.5 billion people don't exist for the next 4 billion people.
Thank you, Lalitesh. You have given excellent insight. We have now Zaki to give the last presentation.
Distinguished delegates, today morning we heard that marketplace is a crucible of all innovations. And I'm from the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, which holds the largest patent portfolio of US patents in India, out of which about 9% has been commercialized. And we understand that markets drive innovation. In the pharmaceutical industry, intellectual property drives innovation. And that creates an incentive for further investment in research and development. But what happens if the markets does not exist? Then intellectual property as a tool to drive innovation disappears, and the incentive for the pharmaceutical industry disappears. We work in the case of tuberculosis, which is a disease which even today kills one person every 20 seconds somewhere in the world, and every 3 minutes 2 Indians die even today of TB. Global market of TB is only about $300 billion, while it is estimated that the cost of drug discovery is about $800 million. Can you get the slides up, please? So what we need to do is to innovate the way we innovate in the case of diseases that do not have market. So what open source drug discovery does is to create unconventional collaborative network, bringing together large number of scientists, researchers, mathematicians, biologists, engineers, anyone who is interested in drug discovery of the neglected diseases onto one platform. And we created a semantic web platform where people can collaborate and work together, where intelligent data gathering is employed. It has been dubbed as a Facebook for scientists. We are now working with Google to add Google Circles to make it more cool. OSDD is now a global community of more than 6,400 members from 130 countries collaborating on this web-based platform. So how did we start our crowdsourcing activities? Way back in 2009, we started with a small problem: collaborative pathway annotation of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which causes TB, the organism which causes TB. We announced a project on the web. We got few students, graduate students, from different parts of the country. And in about 3 months, they were led by scientists from different laboratories in different places. And in 3 months, they could do something which could be managed by professional databases over years. That gave us some confidence, and we addressed then the problem that there are a large number of databases on TB, which we need to make them talk together so that we can get intelligent conclusions from the data that is available and ask cross questions across the databases, which means you have to link these databases. And we opened this project up on the web, and a number of researchers collaborated, and it resulted in a publication. And you could see 2 of those lead researchers were students who, when they were told that the publication has been accepted, they came back and told us, "Sir, we are in a college, we have been told our faculty, how do we handle it?" That's gave us more courage to do something a little more imaginative and ambitious of creating an interactome of MTB. And we announced this challenge. We got about 800 plus researchers. These were led, each of the projects, about 5 components, 5 projects were there. Each of them were led by experienced scientists. They collaborated on the web, and this involved reading a large number of papers from 1964 onwards. Almost about 100,000 papers were read, and the results were annotated, and the community corrected it. Basically, they worked on tools like Google Docs, while scientists were available to chat online. They were not physically known. In fact, over a time, we saw that communities emerged, and the leaders, some of them emerged as leaders who were clearing others' doubts. And finally, when we met them physically, we found that some of the leaders were students, while the members were faculty. So the work was considerable, which has led into very important publications in respected journals. So, Dr. Bernard Munoz had referred in a Nature publication that within weeks, 830 volunteered to re-annotate the entire MTB genome, packing nearly 300 man-years into 4 months. So it's kind of work which we could otherwise cannot do within the pharmaceutical industry or within the closed walls of a laboratory, has been done by opening up the challenge and letting large number of people collaborate. So from bioinformatics, we moved to cheminformatics to develop predictive models of molecules that could have possible impact on tuberculosis. In order to make communities to be more active, we also started a women scientists forum, because of particular social situation in India. We find that a large number of women who are highly educated are available sitting at home, willing to spend their spare time to work on actual problems. And junior scientist forum, which are meant for graduate students who are out there in universities, who are also willing to spend a lot of time on the web. And these have started yielding a number of papers and predictive tools which are available for the community. But we had a problem. When we started cheminformatics, it involved downloading huge data sets with students. When they download onto their laptops, the laptop crashes because you have to download the huge data set and run programs on that. Then the National Knowledge Network, which is Dr. Pitalo's conception and led by Dr. Gairola, came as a support with the national grid called Garuda to provide a backend support to the students so that they can download this on a larger machine and access through web interfaces which the community had created. So these are all informatics, but beyond informatics, in drug discovery, you need to do actual experiments. There are experiments which are being performed in colleges and institutions which are of repute, of some important work, not critical, not pathogenic, but are relevant to drug discovery, done in laboratories across universities. And these results are available for the community to share. And ultimately, a drug is a molecule. You need to get a molecule out there. So we have developed an open chemistry initiative to crowdsource large number of molecules, because the problem is that we need to get, this is a disease for which cure exists, but this cure is from the mid-20th century. We haven't got a new drug in the past 50 years, despite the enormous amount of scientific progress. So how do you get new molecules, diverse molecules that could attend this challenge? So we have requested a large number of researchers across universities, IIT system, and ICERs to synthesize molecules. We remunerate them by paying a certain amount for the expenses they incur, and a top-up grant to get any equipment which is less than 1 million Indian rupees, and per molecules we pay about 3,000 rupees. And we are getting hundreds of molecules. These molecules are being screened against TB, and the result is given back to the researcher so that you could get better publication, and if a result is found, the OSDD platform takes it forward. And in order to ensure quality, we take industry-level data from the researchers, such as NMR data and HPLC, and we accept the molecule only if the community finds it is satisfactory. This initiative has been